All right, so welcome everyone from Victoria. My name's Jack. I'm help run the umbrella organisation, the Red Union Support, and we cover a number of different industries. If you'd like to see which unions we support, you can go to www.redunion.com.au, and you may find a relevant union or association for you there. I do note that we have started only very recently a new union, the Independent Workers Union of Australia, which is a miscellaneous workers union, and was set up primarily to help those in Victoria who fall under this authorised worker definition, to try and assist where we can in advancing workplace health and safety concerns and holding employers to those workplace health and safety pieces of legislation, and any human rights concerns that members have as well. Yes, that includes you if you work for a corporation also. So please, if you haven't joined, join. If you have joined, thank you. Thank you for lending your weight to what we are doing. We are doing our best to mobilise quickly, to be on a footing to have a good collective action in Victoria. And we are concerned that what is happening in Victoria is very similar to what's happening in Queensland. I'll just say we filed a very big significant matter on Friday, just gone in Queensland, in relation to breaches of workplace health and safety and failures to consult and failures to acknowledge very legitimate and reasonable industrial disputes and escalations. So that is on foot in Queensland, and it seems like the same may be happening in Victoria, insofar as employers have not completed risk assessments, employers have not consulted with workers. Employers are seemingly very dumbfounded by the prospect that they have to risk assess, particularly in those public sector employers, which is staggering, because they're being totally gazumped by, an employer like Qantas, who has a rolled gold sort of standard for how to risk assess, and they have done that process exceptionally well. Yet the government can't even hold themselves to comply with their own legislation. But that's just me ranting. So to kick off, hopefully, if you do have concerns about workplace health and safety and the failure of your employer to consult with you on that, I would send off an email very quickly to that effect. And then Miles will go into greater depth. There is a important letter that must be sent out very, very quickly to escalating this in relation to the Section 51 direction, I believe, Miles, is it? But with that, sorry, on the other line is the incomparable Miles Heffernan. He's a legal genius, industrial advocate. He's been doing this for a very long time and knows this stuff better than anyone in the country. And I would say you could not be in better hands. So if you do have some questions, throw them in the chat early, and we'll try and get to them. Otherwise, we'll record this. A lot of the stuff that will end up being in the chat, we get questions over and over all the time about the same stuff. So feel free to go and give this a re-listen, a re-watch, and hopefully we will have answered your questions. So take it away, Miles.
Well, it's very nice to have the fan club, Jack. Thank you. It's very... Now, I saw one of the posts earlier where they said that Direction 51 letter was a little bit wordy. I got a bit of a chuckle, so thank you for whoever wrote that. I'm sorry I missed your name. It's funny, a boss that is willing to lock you out of the workplace, threaten you with dismissal, but then gets a 4-page, deeply considered legal strategy that had gone to senior counsel and been assessed properly, is a bit wordy. I would have thought that a bit wordy would have been the boss that's flapping their gums and not giving you a risk assessment. So your wonderful unions have given you a number of supporting documents. You'll see there are stage 1 and stage 2, stage 3 and stage 4 letters. But they are important critical escalations to raise things. but we do want to bring, and with a big neon sign around 2 letters. They are very similar. So the first letter is generic, and I'll talk about that. And the second letter is to do with construction, residential aged care, education, and healthcare workers. Dealing with the generic letter first, it's on there. It's called its reference number is 2021-1010, Victorian Urgent Direction 51 Risk Assessment Letter (brackets public). That's the wordy letter. It's the second most wordy letter. There is a more wordy letter next to it. Now, what that letter does is put them on notice that any boss that wants to bullshit to you or not talk to you about Direction 51, and you must get that one out. Now, if you are at stage 1 or stage 2 or stage 3 or stage 4 of those other letters, add this one to it. This runs concurrent with it, and get it out. And it's the letter is inside the membership wall. Jack and the team can point you to it, but it's there. Now, there is a separate one if you are in one of those prescribed industries. So, and that is there's a separate letter for construction, residential aged care, healthcare, and also, my apologies, education. Now, Jack, whether Jack puts it in the in there or it's behind the membership wall, I'll leave with Jack to do, but it's there. Now, if you have not sent that letter out, for the love of God, get that out. And if you're not religious, for the love of not God, get it out. Right? It must deal with it.
So, Miles, I'll just very quickly, I'm just going to run next door and I'll get someone to drop it in the chat, a link directly to the letter, so that if anyone's having problems with the website, they can grab it and send it off. So,
no problems. Well, Jack is, and it's Direction 51, and because why Direction 51 is so important is in the preamble of Direction 51 letter, and Jack's going to put it into the live chat in a second. At 1(4), it says that all workplace directions are read together. So when your boss says that the public health directive sits on its own, the word for that is your boss is wrong. And if your boss then learns about Direction 51 and still says it wrong, at that point your boss becomes a bullshit artist, right? And we are much able to deal with a boss that is ill-informed. We get that. Sometimes bosses get it wrong. But once we take the time to educate our boss, perhaps in a wordy letter, then they can stop saying that, because they've then got time to research it. So there are 2 versions of the letter, as I said, one for one industry and one for the other. Now, irrespective of where you are on your stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, and stage 4, get that letter out, and must be ideally no later than tomorrow, but absolutely before the 14th. The Victoria delegated the Fair Work Act, or delegated its public sector laws with relation to employment to the feds many, many years ago. What is wonderful about that is we have such a clean legal strategy, where in most states you have the state-based law and you have the federal law that as well for different employees. But for Victoria, you have the Fair Work Act for all. What it means is there's a really clean line of attack. So if your boss wants to tell you stories or not engage with you meaningfully, let us alert them. Let us assist them. Now, those that are confused, and I do respect that you might be confused, it's just we've written a very tailored letter for Victoria with the benefit of counsel to make sure that you've got all of the biscuits you need in one basket to give to your employer. So yes, there are the stage 1, stage 2, stage 3, and stage 4 letters, but this is a very specialised Victorian letter that covers the field. So it's a do in addition to. It's there for Victorians. I'm a former Victorian. I now live in Queensland. I want to live in Victoria, but you guys won't let me come there because your borders are all locked up. And when I get there, I've got to stay in my hotel room. So when that's back, though, you'll be pleased to know that Victoria, you've got an enormous amount of options, an enormous amount of protection. And I'm online on that document, and I see, as I speak to you, There's over 100 people online right now looking at that document, which is fabulous. And so you are in the right place. Get that letter to it.
One thing, sorry, Miles. Someone has said, can you make clear which one refers to the 4 industries? If you click into it, it should say, one should be generic and not mention any industries, the title of the document up in the top left, and the other one will say construction, health, education, etc. And that one will be the one for those particular industries. Sorry, I should have said that in the message, but I was telling you.
No, right. So there's 2 different ones. Obviously, if it doesn't mention construction or those other industries, use the generic one. So what it means is the Direction 51 at 1 paragraph 4 highlights that that it is open to be read in conjunction and must be read in conjunction with the Victorian Occupational Health and Safety Act of 2004, and that law specifically says that consultation is required. So any boss that's brushing you off, any boss that's saying, I don't need to do a risk assessment, they're wrong. They're just simply wrong. Our job is to let them see the light. And once they've seen the light, we then know that they're not we know they're not accidentally wrong. At that point, we know they're deliberately wrong, and we disabuse them of that. What we must do is ask for them. Now, a boss that says there's no risk assessment, well, that's their job. They must risk assess everything. Importantly, they must risk assess risk mitigation strategies. In other words, when they try and reduce risk, they've got to assess how that reduction might look. And critically important, that step requires consultation with employees. That's consultation with each and every one of you. And if the boss hasn't done that, then they are in trouble. Now, there are some sites that have got complete control of access and egress where rapid antigen testing might just be the ticket. And so if they are demanding you to have a forced medical procedure without assessing rapid antigen testing, well, that might not go so well. Those of you that are employed by the state, that is non-private sector persons or council employees, your boss must consider your human rights in that. Now, there are a number of legal strategies going on. We all saw I call it the Lilo case. I understand it's the Lialo case, which is a curfew case. And the Supreme Court justice that dealt with that was very clear that it was only because it was a temporary basis and it was on fine ballots. And that there is no unchecked power of the Chief Health Officer. The Chief Health Officer is an unelected official. And so it is not the case that they can make rulings, and their decisions are open to be assessed by the Supreme Court. But what's critical? Our legal advice from very, very fancy counsel, and I'm sure they love being called very, very fancy counsel, is that Direction 51 is required so that there is no Supreme Court appeal on the public health direction. It has to be read into it, because in the absence of that, if anyone took it to the Supreme Court, there would be grave concerns the Supreme Court would strike it out. So if your boss is playing that game, you can't call them a bullshit artist. You can think it. You can not even mumble it. You've just got to say, but boss, I want you to reconsider, and I would like you to reconsider with this wordy letter. And then if they don't want you to reconsider with the wordy letter, we give them a second wordy letter. And if they then threaten you with your employment, you have a number of rights that are then preserved and protected. Now, a couple of other questions that are coming in. Always send from your personal email. Never send from your work email. You never know who controls it, who's reading it. Always send from your personal email, right? That's an important question. And if you're, because of the amount of demand, as I have had to say to the previous group, we have over 4,000 correspondences to process. We are in a situation where we aren't going to be able to get through those until at least Sunday, if not Monday. So if you're under an imminent risk of discipline or you need a response back prior to that time, the first thing to do is to seek an extension of time until next Wednesday, right? Saying that because of the amount of demand and your representatives in your union, you need that time. If you do not get that time, then you'll need to revert back to us. I need to stress any employer that is saying that they don't need to do risk assessments is wrong. Now, I go through cautiously, Sarah, by you saying that on that news flash, the ANMF said that you didn't need to do it. No, I've got that news flash. That news flash said the risk assessments might not make a difference to the outcome. What frustrated me in that news flash was that the word discipline was also used. If you are ready, willing, and able to work, why would you be threatened with discipline? Wouldn't it be the case that it might be that your boss would be paying you, that your boss would need to pay you if they're going to give you a reverse strike? You're not needing discipline because you're exercising rights. You're not needing discipline because you're concerned about your health and safety. Can you imagine if this was another basis where you were concerned about the safety of the flooring, and you complained, and your boss said, "I'm going to fire you"? You knew that would be not the case. Don't listen to your boss if they're saying that it's not true. Now, someone asked an interesting question there. Do you put without prejudice on the bottom of it? Absolutely not. This must be open correspondence. This must be without prejudice means we cannot rely upon it later. And so, yeah. Now, finally, I'll answer these questions, then I'll throw to Jack for them. Don't lie about your vaccine. Don't lie that you've got a booking. If you are generally concerned about it, then be honest about that and deal with it. If your boss catches you in a lie, you're done for. If you exercise a workplace right in such a manner as to be dishonest, your boss can fire you for not exercising the right, but for being a lying liar. And so we don't want to give them any bullets, right? We're in the straight up division. We want to consult. We give a fuck about our safety. We give a fuck about our colleagues. And what we don't give a fuck about is your boss lying about a direction. Sorry for swearing on 3 occasions. That's an accident. What we must do, not really, what we must do is respectfully, in good faith, hold your boss to account. And if your boss is lying, then your union will protect you. Now I'll throw to questions, Jack, and I'll have my cup of tea. See, Wills?
So for people that are still confused, scroll right up to the chat, top of the chat, or maybe Control F my name, or search for my name, Jack Maguire, in the chat, because I dropped in 2 links to the Google documents. It's just 2 Google document links. They're open links, so you can click on both of them. Basically, the long and short, if you take out anything away from today and what we're talking about here, is to click on that, copy and paste the contents of that, and put it into your own email and send it off. And please do that today from your own personal email address. Someone said where you go, it's like right up at the top of the chat almost. So you might have to scroll right up, or if you can do a Control F of the chat, which I think you can do, which is like a search function, then you should be able to find it. Just search for my name, Jack Maguire, MCGUIRE, Jack, JACK. Also, these recordings will be available via, let me see if I can do this, if this is going to play with me, via our Telegram. No, it's not. Anyway, so I will drop them later. T.me/NPAA001 is one of our Telegrams, which is just search NPAA and it will come up. And the other one is T.me/Red Unions. Or if you just search Red Unions, it should come up. Both of those Telegrams will have this recording later. So there will be a lot of questions here that are asked, which we will have covered. So I do implore you to go back and listen to it again, because your question, while it's front of mind, we may have answered it right at the very start. Miles, there was one interesting question. Can someone change the word employee to worker to better suit their situation in those letters? Well, I just put the Telegram in.
It's a really good question. So, and that question back and forth, it's funny, the directions, Direction 51 does refer to worker, but I think it's Section 37 of the Occupational Health and Safety Act in Victoria refers to employee. Yes, I do encourage you, you'd like to change it to worker if it does, because worker can include volunteer, worker can include as someone who is a contractor. So yes, you are able to change that at your leisure. I wouldn't change much else to the document. And please, as I said, don't do that without prejudice, because that could actually, funnily enough, prejudice you as a strange curiosity. But definitely, you've got no problem in changing it. We've used the word employee to reflect the language in the Act, but if you don't identify as an employee, then yes, worker would be fine. And so you'll see on the live chat, the Telegram was there. So what this state government one that doesn't need to comply with the Fair Work Act, if you're in Victoria, Victoria has delegated its responsibilities to the Fair Work Act for many areas, and we are, in any event, the correspondence we've got is there. Those that look at Section 351 for anti-discrimination laws, go in cautiously. I wouldn't recommend that you open up that door without getting some legal advice. There are some better ones. Your line of attack is actually Section 341, and also having regard for your industrial dispute provisions in your EBA, which would then trigger a potential contravention of Section 50. But I don't want to quote too much legislations for you. I really appreciate everyone taking the area. And I'm going to say this one, and Ruth, you've obviously got some amazing research, so I'm not countering your advice, but I strongly encourage us not to talk about the criminal code. I'll tell you a fun story of my own, in that I made some comments about a public official who's upset and has sent me some correspondence to say that I've upset them. And even though there was an ability for me to potentially suggest criminality, I've kept my powder dry. And I'm saying that I'm not just giving you that advice as someone who is being cautious. I'm giving someone that advice that I wouldn't do it myself to protect my own legal position. If you accuse someone of criminality, even if it is well placed, you're going to pour petrol on a situation that you might not need to. You've got a beautiful cause of action here. You've got a beautiful line to get your boss to play. You've got beautiful human rights laws in Victoria. So we don't need to bring a big mallet out. Let your boss engage respectfully on the areas in that direction 51, and everything else will happen. You can always escalate later and threaten those other areas. Is that too conservative, Jack? Am I being too nice?
So someone's, where did the question go?
Yes, you are correct, by the way. That is the letter.
Someone said here, my employer wants to know my reasons for not getting the jab. It sounds a little bit like maybe the consultation process has started there, but should there be a risk assessment first before we talk about the reasons?
Yeah. The simple, blunt, plain, and perhaps even boring answer is the reason you can't get a jab is that your boss hasn't discharged its obligations to consult with you, and you very well may get the jab at the end of that consultation process. You just don't know. Because if we're all going to say we're going to consult with our boss, but under no circumstances, no, not ever, will that change our opinion, then of course we shouldn't be asking of that, because then we're being sneaky. It is important to make your boss to account. Your boss is going to try and play games, though. Your boss might call you an anti-vaxxer. Your boss might try and characterise it as you refusing. I saw a concept of declinature being used. Isn't that amazing, this concept to decline? You're not declining nothing. Your boss is requiring you to consent. So you're not declining to consent, are you? You're just not agreeing to your boss's direction because we say that it's issued prematurely. It's issued in the absence of a risk assessment. It's issued in the absence of material safety data sheets. And critically important, it's issued in the absence of you getting a vote and having a conversation and trying to get to consensus.
Wonderful. There's a few questions here about, does this apply to me? What should I do? Yes, all of this applies to you. And as I said, go back up and have a look at those two letters that were dropped in the chat. One is a generic one for everybody to use, whether you're in retail or whatever sector you're in. And the other one is also to for construction, education, health. I think it says in the top of the letter, so you can basically just use a bit of common sense and see which one applies to you. Copy that, paste it, and send that off, and do as the letter says. I think it's just to CC us in as well, so that we can keep track of the correspondence, and that will help us, gauge where Victoria Health are at and Victoria Education are at, and other public sectors as well as private employers. But it also explains some of the law to some of the private employers who may not know what they're doing. So there's another question too about what should I do as an employer? Have a read of that letter as well, because that will, I guess, show you some of the concerns that your employees may be concerned about. And I would try and allay those concerns by conducting a risk assessment, seeing what other alternatives are available for people. Should they not be able to get the jab, or for whatever reason, there may be other options you look at doing. I think you just need to, basically have turned your mind to it and come up with some alternatives. I mean, rapid antigen testing is one. I guess it depends on the workplace, and maybe you could have your workers work from home. There's a number of different ways to skin the cat, I guess, and that varies from workplace to workplace. So I would send off a request for a risk assessment, then send this letter very quickly afterwards. And that's the long and short of it. Shouldn't be more confusing than that. I hope that's really clear for people who are playing on at home.
Sorry, I just wanted to. I see a couple of you. Sorry, Jacob, I've interrupted there, mate. I see a couple of you have asked if your boss has asked for a verbal meeting or dialogue. If your boss is asking for that in the absence of documents, I'm not sure what you can have a chitty chat about, but we're here to help you, right? The first thing is, if your boss is trying to shirt front you into a meeting and not giving you any information, what dialogue can you have? Once they've given you the risk assessments, the conversation can start. So if they're trying to scare you or bully you or in other ways intimidate you into a meeting, that's a different story. But if your boss is taking your letter and genuinely interested in talking to you, then of course you should talk to them. Now, the first stage would always be the boss talking to the worker. If that is being misused, we could deal with that. If it is not being misused, then you might feel comfortable to go. Depending if it's in the next couple of days, I won't lie to you, until at least Monday of next week, we are so stretched just trying to get through everything that it will be difficult to provide on the ground physical support with the amount of inquiries we've got, but we should be able to Zoom in or telephone call on the most critical. But ideally, we try and stagger these meetings to meet some availability. Secondly, those that are talking about taking sick leave, I get that you've got to pay your bills. I get that you've got to deal with these things, but sick leave is there for when you're sick, not when your boss is trying to unlawfully stand you down, unlawfully provide a reverse strike, and unlawfully not consult with you, and potentially unlawfully discriminate against you. So please, I get that money's got to come in, but that might be a different blue for another day.
People are still asking where to find the risk assessment letter. Sorry, well, that's twofold. One, if you go to redunion.com.au, select your relevant union. So that's redunion.com.au. It has a list of all the unions. Select which union you are in or about to become a member of. On the very home page, it has WHS concerns. Click on that and it'll show you the steps. It'll also then link you to your dashboard where this the letter that we're talking about now is available. Also, again, we've placed it in the chat at the very top. You just have to search my name, Jack McGuire, in the chat, and you should be able to find it. Apologies for, there is some tricks with the website. It is playing up just because there is so much demand on the servers at the moment. I don't know what's happening with the glitches. So as I said, we have also, or should have also, emailed out that instructions in relation to that to members. We'll be doing it again very soon, just to give people a reminder for those particularly in Victoria. So just keep an eye out on your emails as well, and also giving you an opportunity, if you haven't joined yet, to join, and then we will have we'll email you tomorrow morning again with a reminder. Okay. Any news on sole traders? Do you think 51 can be sent to third parties?
It's across the board. Whether you work for if you are working for a sole trader, if you are the sole trader, we would need to give you some specific advice, but in broad terms, they are read together. So if your risk assessment provides for it, it would depend on who you're interacting with, but it is not the case. And it might be that you are able to grant yourself an exemption, but we'll need to give you very specific advice on that discrete point. And so, yeah.
I'm up against very large corporates when they give you a risk assessment. Where to go from there? So that would be wonderful if they give you a risk assessment. If they give you the risk assessment, then we are in we can help you with that and help you through that risk assessment process. If they've just plucked this risk assessment out of thin air though without consultation, well, that's also an issue because they have a duty to consult. So that consultation process is something that will happen, obviously, and that we will help you go through. And this is all we're trying to get employers to do is come to the table and rationally assess risk.
I mean, that is a bit wordy there, Jack. I mean, really. I mean, you could have, tried to protect the health and safety of your members with a little bit less chitter-chatter, couldn't you?
All we're doing is just asking them to be rational. There are other alternatives. As we said, I could give you an example, which we're looking into for schools as a viable alternative, particularly in New South Wales. They're worried about opening up too soon. Ventilation hasn't properly been explored. Compliance with masks in kids is very difficult. Well, perhaps if rapid antigen testing was instituted at the front gate, which they are a handful of dollars now, I think, a rapid antigen test, and they take 1 to 3 minutes to come back with a saliva test, whether you've got COVID or not. Well, if you do that for every single person entering the school property, and you know that they don't have COVID, well, people wouldn't have to wear masks because if you don't have COVID, you can't pass it on. And it wouldn't matter whether you're vaccinated or unvaccinated.
I'll comment, Jack, you're being imaginary. It's not like schools have ever had to control it. I mean, schools have never had to lock out a bad person at all. So what are you talking about? It's a free range. What do you mean? And this is the bullshit that the employers are going on with when they're wanting to say that there's no other option, right? So just be careful of that. There are going to be times, though, where a vax may be the only option. That's not to say there's not. But what it is that there are, well, it shouldn't be lazy. And we're all drawn by the very powerful decision of Deputy President Dean from the Fair Work Commission, who made it absolutely clear, right, that the intervention should be the minimum as is appropriate, right? And so when rapid antigen testing is not even being considered, the minimum that's appropriate is also not being considered. And there's a theme emerging that your boss is following those directions, the not following Workplace Direction 51 and saying that's okay. Now, whether that be in education or whether that be in any area, they must, right? So I see there's 158 messages here, and there are so many people saying exactly the same thing. We feel for you. We understand the bullshit you're getting. But I want to touch on, Kirsten, you made a really good question. And it says, or should I send the Directions 51 letter instead? Never use the word or and never use the word instead. Send everything. Give your employer every opportunity to consult. Maybe not all in one letter. You don't need to attach 1, 2, and 3, and 4 and Direction 51 letter all in the one. But the Direction 51 letter is in addition to, right, all of your other steps. And the purpose of the Direction 51 letter is so that there can be no confusion. And then we might need to give a copy of the Direction 51 letter to your boss and your boss's boss and your boss's boss, because the one thing we do not want to do is allow anybody involved in any discipline or performance management to suggest for a moment that they were blindly unaware that Direction 51 was to be read in conjunction with. So I'll just read it out for you, for those at home. And it says, these directions, this is Direction 51, 1 paragraph 4, these directions are intended to supplement any obligation an employer may have under the OH&S Act and are not intended to derogate from any such obligations, which is fancy lawyer words. Easiest way to understand supplement. If you won the supplementary numbers in lotto, you don't win the lotto, do you? They're in addition to, right? So they do not replace. If I've got a supplementary number and it's not the main ones, I can't carry the prize. Supplement means in addition to, and derogate's a fancy word for depart. It's not intended to depart from safety laws, right? So that's fancy lawyer talk for read them together because you bloody well have to.
So I think that answers, there's a question here from Julie. Monash said in response to the letter, they didn't need to provide a risk assessment as the CHO directive of 7 October meant that superseded any normal requirement for risk assessment, basically pointing off. If you read the letter, the contents of that letter that you would have sent to them and what Miles said then, it literally goes into and says that they are wrong.
But hang on, Jack, let me be fair. Come on. It's a hospital and they're fancy hospital administrators. They would never have to deal with complex, conflicting priorities before. Like hospitals, they're all so linear and so simple, right? So It might be a bit tricky. Whoever got that letter, it's a really good letter in response. We shall file that in the lying liar section. Just escalate that to their boss. Make sure you drop it into people that are decision makers. Make sure HR knows. Follow the disputes procedure to the letter. Don't be tricky. We'll get that letter to the board though.
Yes. Questers forward all emails. You have section 227 and 228 of the Vic Police Act 2013 makes this an offence. My understanding is if you are a member of a union, you can share any of that with a member of, share this information with a member of your union, and also, I mean, you're entitled to representation. So I think in one of these soon to be letters, or in that letter itself, it even appoints us as an advocate and Miles and his team as an advocate. In those circumstances, you're certainly allowed to share this information with us so that we can advocate for you. It's a bit hard to advocate without having any of that information.
And I'm not here to give you legal advice on criminality. It's outside of my specialty. But those sections are about you taking information you've got in the course of your role as a sworn police officer and giving them for another purpose. And I'm talking in broad terms. This is not legal advice. I'm unable to give you legal advice in that area, but please, disseminating information about your own personnel file to get your own personal advice, you're on safe ground. If you were to then publish police information on the internet, you probably should expect that your day's going to get a bit shitty.
The Privacy Act and Constitution part, look, it may be the case that we get to some sort of point where we are launching a judicial review in Victoria. We certainly did that in Queensland, and we relied on the Human Rights Act up in Queensland. Very similar human rights rules exist in Victoria. So I dare say that may become an issue. Along with the privacy. Constitutional arguments, we have asked our QC and he wasn't so gung-ho on that, but I do think we have a really neat, simple case in that an employer has obligations under OHS laws which are referenced by the CHO that they must comply with, and they're not. And even when you are sending these letters off, if they're ignoring you, if they're sending back insufficient risk assessments, etc., that's them then failing to acknowledge your industrial dispute as you're escalating it. So there's a whole lot of things that can then be born out of this you guys just sending off those letters. And as we saw in Queensland, after there is a flood of these letters going off, it prompts them to react. And then once they react, we will react to that reaction. And I guess it's as simple as that. It'll be very fluid. Sorry, Miles.
No. So one of my favourites was a very cross hospital official yesterday writing back, well, I don't know who's helping you write all these letters, but I'm not going to respond to them all. I'm like, oh, well, I mean, that is a option. It's not the strategy that I'd be embarking on if I was the employer, but good luck to you. So your job is to respectfully engage with your employer, but we can't demand that. But woe betide the employer that decides to try and fire you, cut your pay, discipline you, suggest that you're acting willfully against their rules simply because they didn't engage. If anything, the secret with those employers is to not lose your cool, because there is a real risk that your employer will try and hit you for another reason, you know, about not being respectful, etc. Right? So just be careful of that. And whoever, if someone's been fired, and I don't want to get distracted by the messages, you got 21 days to pursue dismissal. If you have been fired, we can deal with it. And if it's been about you fitting the company, it might be a general protections claim. We can't give you individual advice about being terminated here, but please stress the 21-day period. We are open over the weekend between both Red Union and our officers working together. We've got the same data, so we can assist you if you have been fired. But if you if that happened and it was not a pre-existing issue, or we can assist you at a reduced fee rate if it was a pre-existing issue.
There's a lot of stuff going over the same grounds of content. What we might do is I'll give everyone sort of maybe like an hour or so to become a member if they haven't become a member yet, and we'll be emailing all of our members in Victoria very simple instructions on what we recommend. And that is just to send off that letter, and we will send a link in that email to that letter, so that you can copy and paste it and get it off tonight as soon as possible. On Direction 51 letter, what email should we put where it states by email at the top? That's to whoever you're emailing.
So the rule on that is your boss, first of all, your immediate boss, and if there is an HR department that your policy requires you to copy, you should copy that. If there is an email on a standard complaints, like how you raise your complaints with your employer, such as a generic HR inbox, copy that. But the requirement is simply your first up boss, and if they don't deal with it, then there's a second up boss. The Direction 51 hasn't been written expressly for students, but if you did change the words from employee to worker, it would then become written for students. I hope I've been helpful in that. Definitely non-legal advice, legal advice.
Wonderful. So look, we may pull it up there because we sort of are going over some of the same themes. Everyone's asking, well, who are we CC in? Where's the link, etc. What can I join? I just reiterate, go to redunion.com.au. You will find a union there that will cover you. If all else fails, go to the IWUA, which is the Independent Workers Union of Australia. It is a miscellaneous workers union, so it's supposed to be a catch-all for those that are worried. If you're in finance, if you're in retail, if you're on whatever industry you're in, and you don't think that you fit in, say, the nurses union or the teachers union, then go to the IWUA. We have gone over some of this stuff, so please keep an eye out. I'll give you about an hour if you haven't joined already to join. We'll send an email out to all members tonight. It may be tomorrow morning, but I'm hoping tonight with the steps that we've outlined here. Some people are saying it's a little bit confusing, so we will make it abundantly clear what we recommend that you do.
All right, and so Jack, I just want to raise three things. I've seen the word confusing a number of times. I know this is a stressful time, and so I need us to cut through the difficult stress that you're going through, because it's not anything that needs to be confusing. You just have to get the Direction 51 letter out, and that's it. That's it to your boss, and do so immediately. Please know that I understand that it's overwhelming because your boss is trying to misuse their power. Secondly, as difficult as it is, if you aren't facing termination, it's an underpayment of wages claim. It's a contravention of the Fair Work Act claim. It means that we can preserve your position. I don't like that some of these questions are not engaging with what you're being told, though. It's simply saying to go to your boss. Stop trying to change the process. Stop trying to second guess it. Your union has done a fabulous job of protecting your interest. Stop double guessing it. I understand you're stressed. I'm not trying to sound like a snarky little uncle here, but you're doing yourself a disservice by trying to find alternative advice. Follow the processes. Rob A, I love you. Well done. Just follow the steps as prescribed. Get the Section 50, Direction 51 letter out. It's critically important. and then if your boss wants to engage, then that's what you need to do. I'm incredibly proud of everyone for the difficult way, in very difficult circumstances you're handling yourself. I'm incredibly impressed to be working with the Red Union support team and helping you. But whatever you do, don't try and second guess it. Just follow these steps and we can protect you. As I said, in a matter in Queensland, Senior Council looked at what we did and saw the ground game and saw all the options. It's not dodgy, but follow the process, be legitimately engaged to work with the risk assessment, and we can save your job and we can get you paid. We might not get you paid straight away. It might be the boss tries to starve you out. That's next week's fight. Right now, we're stopping you getting fired. Next week, we recover your money, right? And I'm sorry that we've got to triage it like that, but unfortunately, with over 4,000 letters, that is what it is. I wish it was different. I wish other organisations that you paid your dues for were supporting you, but I'm incredibly proud to be supporting you through Jack's team, and I'll leave my sermon there.
Oh, thanks very much. I got another message here. Privacy Matters wanting to talk about Qantas. Perhaps we could send us an email about that specifically with the update there. It sounds like an interesting update, and we might discuss that offline, how we can assist. For everyone else, yes, you can join Red Union, REDUNION .com.au. And that's where you can find with our unions, and you can join, and there should be the process on the homepage. And if you join in the next hour, then you will get an email from us with a pretty succinct way forward for everybody. So do we send the letter? Yes, please send the letter.
Yes, for the love of fucking God, send that Direction 51 letter. And someone said, can I tell them I'm refusing to take the vaccine? If you do, you shouldn't be on this call. What we want to do is learn the consultation. If you're a no, not ever, I'm never taking any medicine, no matter what. I'm not going to consider other risk implementations such as rapid antigen testing. We can't help you, because this is about meaningfully, honestly, and in good faith talking to your employer. But if you're a no, not ever, under no God circumstances, we can't help, because your employer will say you are acting in bad faith, and they will probably bullet you for something else. And Di, I love you. Send that letter, large in capitals, spot on. Everyone should listen to Di. I hope she's a lovely auntie, Di.
Trying to join and need a referral code. You can progress without putting a referral code in. But now that I've said that, someone may throw up their own code. I don't know. But so just to reiterate that, thanks very much for that, Miles. We might draw it to a close there because I've still got so much work to do. But thank you very much for your time, Miles. For joining in. This probably won't be the last one that we have. We will be coordinating again. I know we do these sort of very last minute, but keep an eye on your emails and Telegram. Join our Telegram. Please join our Telegram. Go to Telegram, search for Red Unions, and also search for NPAA. We'll distribute our next Zooms through that. And keep an eye out for emails. If you join now, the next hour, we'll get you that email with the links to the letters, and away we will go.
And send no dose.
All right. But thanks very much again, everyone. Thanks very much, Miles.